Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this October 22nd, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com, and you can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. On my Tuesday show, I labeled it as the most important show you'll ever listen to in your life. On my Wednesday show, that was yesterday, I labeled it the most dangerous show you will ever listen to in your life. And on today's Part 3 show of the same topic, I'm labeling it the most important and the most dangerous show you will ever listen to in your life. And the reason I mention that is behind all of the antics of the New World Order, I should say the Vatican-led New World Order. And when we look closely at this organization, we see they're playing havoc with most every part of our lives. It's the control of mind, body, and soul. And I said a long time ago that people have to start thinking in different terms. At this particular juncture, we do not have separate independent governments. Oh, they call themselves by names like this, the Russian government, the Chinese government, the American government. But secretly, they all are working together. So we have a global government as we speak. They just don't call it that. Now, I believe down the road, I don't know, maybe by 2030, they will be calling it a one-world government, not just in their subliminal messages or in speeches, but actually names will be changed publicly, and people, they hope, will rally behind this unity. Now, when we look at the spiritual end, this cannot be accomplished without the spiritual controller of the New World Order, which is basically occultism, Satanism, directed right from the authority of that's the Vatican. And they are the same way. They cannot function without control. And if you look at their organization closely, like I did when I lived in Rome for 8 years, you'll see that the Vatican operates in a fascistic way, but in many different ways. They have concordats all over the world, intermingling with the governments of the world. So basically, when you look at the richest organization in the world, these two are working together. And nothing more evident of that was when the Pope arrived here in September and put his stamp of approval on everything, and everybody bowed down to him. He is the leader. It is the Roman Empire again and again and again, gaining power. The beast, remember, was wounded, and now she's come back. Now listen to what I'm going to tell you. You've got to rethink everything. What the Vatican and our government, our one world government, which has many different names now, all they want is control and obedience. Their biggest enemy is independence. And that's what makes living in America so interesting. Because behind those words of independence and freedom and the Constitution and all those good things and the Founding Fathers, we find nothing but the same system working in the most deceptive manner possible. And this began, the planning of it began way before 1776. But that's when things began to roll in their favor. And as you see, this global government, I call us basically, if you want to give us a title, we are the Roman Empire's army. We do their dirty work. We spend our tax dollars on fighting every world problem. And in a sense, we're due to get our butts kicked in the next one. And that's what's being planned right as we speak. So, what my shows are about are, we could spend hours on every one of the topics that I've spent 10 years talking about. But if we synthesize it down to the main culprit, the biggest asset they have is utilizing mind control techniques. And we can look back to Germany to find World War II and Hitler to find how these techniques have been improved now here in America using the same technology, the same people. And you can also see the insidious connection between the Vatican, Hitler, Pacelli, Pope Pius XII, the Vatican rat lines, and all the connections allowing Nazi war criminals, even Werner von Braun, the supposed architect of all of our space programs and everything like that, which is a sham now if you really want to look at it. We don't go to space. We don't even know what's past a certain little spot above us. We've been so misdirected with information, so mind controlled, that they laugh when they go to bed every night because they know we don't even know what kind of planet or what kind of circle Earth, flat Earth we live on. We have no idea. And basically they control the funding, the money. They control where we go. Why are they protecting Antarctica? Now you think Antarctica's at the bottom. You know, you're thinking, and right in your mind created a globe. No, it's not. I'm convinced it's a circle surrounding everything, and the North Pole actually sits in the middle of everything. And if you think that's a crazy concept, look back to how the whole thing started. What we used to think about the Earth, and then when it changed to the globe, who was involved in it, and you'll also see the Vatican played both sides of the coin, and they do. They've always done it. Whatever means of control the government and that organization working together, ours, Russia, the whole thing, we might as well start thinking in terms of a global government now because that's what it is. Because behind the scenes, that's exactly what they're doing. So why I call this the most important and the most dangerous show is that we're going to synthesize it down to, and I've done it in the last two shows, what I consider to be the main element, the way they get control through what? The puzzle's easy to figure out. If you can mind control a population, you can have total obedience and they will listen to anything that we say. Now, they do it in many different ways. Our media is a part of it. That's why you don't get anything in the truth there. Our media has deteriorated to a point of being nothing but a mouthpiece of the Vatican and the government. Then we get it through Hollywood, which basically is telling us and giving us all these messages and all these movies and all of their work. Even when you go to the Super Bowl, you'll see Katy Perry riding the Beast. The Beast is the first. Guess who that Beast is? She was riding the Beast, the whore of Babylon, and nobody seems to catch it. It's everywhere. Then you go to your government mind control, what they do to you. But the most sinister part of it all is when you go one step farther. They're not satisfied with just using the media, using the government, using all of their money and tools and war and profiteering. They want to figure out the ultimate weapon to actually get inside your head and control the masses. Because you know what? It's very simple. Think of it this way. Farmers use cattle prods. I consider the owners of our country to be the head farmers and us nothing more than the cattle. And the cattle prods happen to be microwave weaponry. And if you don't think it exists, first of all, listen to a couple of my shows Tuesday and Wednesday, because I'm not going to do a whole show just repeating myself. But we're going to talk really here quickly. I'll just give you what's happening. And I can tell you that it is happening because I interviewed hundreds of people around the world, spent a couple of years of my life seriously looking into it, actually became a target myself, and so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to play a little bit of a presentation by General Barry Trower. He describes microwave weapons and their use on human beings since the 50s. And on the subject of the use of microwave weapons on us, He said this. He said, by changing the pulse frequency of microwaves going into the brain and interfering with the brain, you could induce psychiatric illness to a point where a psychiatrist could not tell if it is a genuine psychiatric illness or an induced psychiatric illness. Now, how does this work? It's I've spent hours and hours and hundreds of hours researching how they can work it and how you can prevent it from happening. It's very, very complicated and difficult, and there's so many different solutions. I knew one woman who was so targeted, and I remember this story so well, that she basically had to dig a hole in her backyard to sleep in because she could not take the beaming anymore that was coming through into her home. It was an amazing story. Was she digging her own grave? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, she wasn't one of the government agents that are here to deceive you about this, because they always do that. They always put somebody in there to disrupt us human beings trying to get at the truth. And then if she wasn't delusional or actually insane, and and when you look at that term, she would have been considered insane if she went to the authorities. At least she understood she can't go to the authorities, or they would have put her away. And these technologies, how exactly? Well, they shoot beams of microwaves. It can be very minimal. It can be very, very pervasive. And there are many different techniques. They can do it from a car. They can do it from a van. If they want to, and I've had people being targeted that way, communities who have gotten together to say, hey, what is going on here? They can also shoot it into the atmosphere and redirect the target from that. And that's why I think they put a lot of these metals in chemtrails up there. That's one of the reasons, because this increases the intensity, and they can target in that manner by using cell towers and a whole bunch of other methods, HARP, all the things that we are not privy to, and we have to speculate. But it is going on. And this, look, the question is then, and I'm going to get into this, and then get to Barry Trower's informative discussion on this. And I'll do that in 1 second. Let me say this, that who's doing the targeting? That's a complicated question. It isn't just government officials. The military has admitted they have this weaponry, and they use it. They will use it on enemies. They've tested it. And when asked, a general was asked, would you use this on American people? Of course we don't use it on innocents, he said, but we would use it on an unruly mob. Now, this expert, Barry Trower, he's from England, brags about the British being the most advanced in the field of microwave weapons. But it isn't only them, it's us, it's Russia. And you have to consider, when we're working with a global elite, they share these sinister things and they argue and pretend they're at war about others, right? Why would Russia and America, who hated each other supposedly during the Cold War, enter into an agreement to protect Antarctica? Now, if we hate each other and we're warring, we wouldn't do that. We'd want to control Antarctica, but it still sits today. 60 countries have formed a triumvirate, whatever 60 together is, to protect Antarctica against us from finding out the truth about what it really is. Ask yourself that question and check into the Antarctica Treaty. Now, the question becomes, I believe that a lot of these technologies are farmed out to private companies, we have a pervasive system where we can get allegiance to any government by money. So who does it is a question, but put it this way, it's being done all over the world. Covert ops, U.S. government, Russian government, the Vatican knows all about this technology because they work hand in hand to perfect it and provide the money for it. So, what are the symptoms? We're going to talk a little bit about the symptoms, okay? And the symptoms, and then we'll get into his little discussion after that. Now, I know pretty well some of them through talking to people who have had them, which can be almost to a point of creating convulsions, creating arrhythmic heartbeats to a point where you feel like your heart is pounding out of your chest and you need to call 911 or you feel like you're going to die. I've had other people have symptoms where they couldn't breathe. But other people's symptoms where they were burned on their arms and legs. I happen to be one who had cigarette burns all over my arms and legs at a period of time. When I realized I was being targeted, I did realize one thing by doing all these shows about it, that I don't have anywhere to go. If I went to people and told them how I felt at that time, they would have classified me mentally ill. The government's not going to come to your aid. Doctors aren't. Your family won't even, in a sense, if they're not privy to this information. And especially if you deal in alternative media or alternative to the alternative and talk in this manner, they think you're crazy already. Imagine when you come to them with this story. And the biggest complaint I had from people that were being targeted is they had nowhere to go. Now, symptoms may slowly increase, they can come and go, or continue almost constantly. It seems to depend on how we are being targeted and for what purpose. And that's what you got to think about. Now, I made a statement on my show. I said, if you are like me and you are going to dig into this deeply, whether you be a radio broadcaster or just an independent researcher, and you begin to go public, whether you do YouTubes or all this stuff, you will be targeted. And they have a purpose for that. Now, I'm saying, so you feel, well, if I don't do that, I'll be safe. No. I've talked to many people that had no reason in the world. They were basically picked out as guinea pigs to see how they would react. Now, think of it all the way. It's a good moneymaker, too. Get the person to be mentally ill, then they go to the doctor and they spend all this money on drugs. So, hey, I'm not saying they don't have just a capitalistic view on this as well. But most victims appear to experience unnoticeable brainwashing and are not aware of what is happening. And I can tell you that because when it was happening to me, I wasn't aware at the beginning until it got to a point where it was disrupting everything I was doing for a period of maybe 6 months. Now, the most common symptoms are mental numbness, fatigue, confusion, a faint high-pitched ringing in the ears. Now, I had this confusion set in. After these burns I would see on my arms, I would have this, you know how, normally you walk into a room, we all have that in common, and that doesn't mean you're being targeted, but you go into a room and you go, why was I there? Well, you walk around for a few minutes not knowing where you're at, wondering you begin to get certain confusion to a point where you're hearing things. And that's the first sign when you start talking up to a doctor or to your family. You say, I hear voices. I'm confused. And they go, oh, boy, we got to get him on drugs. He's ill. He's mentally ill. It's happening to him. It's happening to her. And that's the most common thing I found with people. And I found a lot of these people end up trying. I asked a person, I said, where do you live? He was being targeted. He said, I live at home, but I can't go there much anymore. I find I'm better off if I take my car somewhere and I take a sleeping bag and I go find a place where no one knows where I'm at and I just sleep out under the stars. I don't carry my cell phone. No way. And he said, at least I can get one good night's sleep. Now, how'd you like to live like that? Now, if you actually if you were looking from the outside in at this guy, what would you say? Oh, he's got to be crazy. Who's causing the craziness? The doctors will tell you, and this is why the psychiatric community is involved in this, and why they were involved back during the time of Hitler. And maybe on Monday, I got Greg Ciego of the Alamo Ministry coming on. We're going to talk about DHS tomorrow, the Department of Human Services, and their unbelievable tactics on kids. But anyway, on Monday, maybe I'll get into the psychiatric element and where it came from in Germany, where this really started to become, the drugging of America. Man, if you look at these drugs they come up with, I mean, unbelievable. and I'll get into, let me just say this before I go any farther. I did some shows on GMAF and all these doctors, these natural doctors that have found a pretty successful natural battle against cancer, and it's something that our body produces itself that they figured out a way to stop producing. Now, many of these guys have been killed in the last 6 months. I get emails all the time. It's up to 12 or 13, and I've done a couple of shows and would like to do more in-depth look at this. But it's pretty obvious what's happening. And then the other day I'm listening to an advertisement on TV, and now they got a drug that comes out that you take instead of chemotherapy. So they're already ahead of the game, the pharmaceutical industry. It somehow got through very quickly. But the side effects of this drug are really to the point they said it may kill you. Now, who the hell in their right mind is going to take that? I mean, it's insane. They're insane, but they're depicted as sane. That's the way it works. So, the symptoms. There's no unnoticeable brainwashing at the beginning, mental numbness, fatigue, a faint high-pitching ring in the ears. Don't tell me about the ringing in the ears. When that happened to me about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little longer, I've still to this day got two different pitches going on in both my ears. And it comes and goes, stronger sometimes, not so strong. And then I get a headache at one point on the side of my head, the left side of my head, maybe once every week. And it's amazing that it's at the same exact spot. That started 8 years ago, went away, now it's coming back again. So maybe where they figured out where that came at, I don't know. But it's been around a while. Unusual neck tension, the headaches, unusual thoughts that do not match feelings. Now, that's a difficult one because, especially if you have well, let's just leave that one because unusual thoughts, what are those, Is it all of a sudden you're having a nice day, there's no reason to say, I want to kill myself? Is that an unusual thought? It could be. But when it goes back and on and on and on, and it comes up at certain particular junctures in your thought patterns, when it shouldn't be there, when it only comes up at certain times. Now, those are the things you got to watch out for. You could be just a guinea pig they pick out of the blue, or you could be one that's targeted for a specific purpose. Now, long term, and you could get to the point of being, you think MK Ultra is a joke? They go to the extent of programming people to actually become assassins. That Manchurian Candidate movie was not fiction. Long-term mind control victims can become disconnected from their hearts and natural instincts and can seem narcissistic, which is one of the worst outcomes. It's the interference of our process of feeling, thinking, and sensing is lethal to our psychological health. Think about it. What do they consider? They're always saying something like, he doesn't care about humanity. He doesn't care. Do you think about it in your own heart? Do you have feeling, thinking about your fellow man anymore? What is blocking that? Now, it could be mind control from just the subliminal points that they do on TV and all that stuff. I mean, that works on people. When you start seeing 100,000 people getting killed in all these video games, you pretty soon start thinking, what's the difference? They're just, many people, you walk in America and you'll be hard-pressed to get a hello from somebody these days. I thought, people ask me, and I better check the time. I'm way overboard.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet. or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second segment of this October 22nd, 2015 show, and I apologize. You probably heard me just break off. I don't know where I broke off at the break. I went over about a minute and a half, so I had to erase that part. Don't know exactly where I left off, and that happens to me sometimes when I really get into a subject that's interesting. Now, I'm going to just start. We're talking about the symptoms of mind control, and I was telling you about my certain symptoms I felt I had, how people have nowhere really to go. And these long-term mind control victims can become so disconnected from their hearts and natural instincts, they can seem narcissistic, etc. They don't think, they don't feel anything towards their fellow man. Now, what I said, and you know, you're hard-pressed sometimes, and I think I said this when I was not on the air. You're hard-pressed to even get a hello anymore in America, and then you look at all these video games. I mean, that's just a subliminal way of saying, hey, a human being is nothing but that little character on that screen, and you can kill him anytime you want. It's not really going to hurt him. It's only a game. And how many people look at people now in America the same way? It's a very, very disoriented type of society that I think. And one of the people asked me, what was the major difference when you came back from Italy for all those years? And I said, the thing I noticed most was that nobody talks to anybody. Nobody communicates. And then I started thinking, you know, why are people so, in a sense, they're basically very, very loners. They get along with a little bit of their family. Certain people have friends in their neighborhoods. And I believe luck is not something that is just luck. The more you talk to people, the more lucky you get, the luckier you get. I'm convinced of that, because if you communicate with people, if you start socializing really the way you're meant to be, and in Italy you socialize it's incredible. No, you're going to meet some idiots just like you would anywhere. But you don't lock yourself and hold yourself up in your bunker. The more you socialize and begin to experience the beauty of life and everything, your luck will get better. I'll tell you, that's what happened to me in Italy. I never was luckier in my life there, and I don't consider it just luck. I consider it being social. Now, hold up in America, that's what they want. Long-term, heavy targeted individuals. They can have unusual symptoms like sincere, tooth decay that just keeps going, unusual dry scalp, ridges on fingernails, chains of unusual medical infliction, constantly getting ill, unusual discord between family members, this lack of socializing, wanting to just stay in your house, periods of diminished hearing, eyesight, sudden onset of unexplainable neurological problems, sharp pains shooting in the head, as well as symptoms that mimic mental illness, depression, split personality disorder, paranoid schizophrenia, all these things. Parts of the targeting seem sadistic, satanic, they are, with intentions to inflict psychological suffering and chaos. That's where they're heading. In severe cases, it appears that the mind control victim can be completely controlled by criminals who force them to do things to other people, lethal shootings at schools, etc., etc. Now, some people seem less susceptible, and people who are taking mood-altering drugs, who get on antidepressants, are more susceptible to this, and it is a chain reaction of how are we going to... Now, if these weapons didn't exist, I think we'd have a clearer picture of humanity, of what... But this high rate of insanity that's going on in this country, this constant rise of illnesses, whether it be physical or mental, feeds into the pharmaceutical industry's money-making machine, the doctors, the whole thing. They all work together, create the illness, and then we'll create the cure, supposedly, but the cure never seems to cure. Now, what I want to do, the question I also, what will become of us if we're not allowed to have a free mind? Now, when I talk about, we want to talk a little bit here about the technical things behind this. Does it really exist? I mean, you're going to always, he's just making it up. The government can't do things. They don't want to hurt you. They want to protect you. Well, let's listen to Barry Trower. Remember I mentioned him? He's an expert on this technology. And I thought you might be interested in hearing a little bit about his background and what he has to say about this technology that is pervasive in our society, in our world.
Yes, of course. In 1960, I was in the Royal Navy, and I worked partly with the underwater bomb disposal unit, partly with microwave warfare, and some of the other time with radar. Microwaves were involved in all of those three different areas. So whilst I was in the Royal Navy, I trained in all aspects of microwave technology. And as anybody will tell you that's been in the forces, the training you receive is second to none. You practice it, you talk about it all day, you sleep it. So since 1960, I have been involved in all aspects of microwave technology. After that, a part of my job, because I had microwave expertise, was to question captured spies during the Cold War, when Russia and America were within seconds of global nuclear war, and microwaves by then were really sophisticated stealth weapons. And a part of my job was to find out from any spies who had been captured what the current knowledge was in that part of the world.
Well, this technology is truly frightening, really frightening.
Well, this is why it's microwave weapons were introduced from the 1950s, 60s, 70s to the present day. And this is another level of proof. They are so effective. If you're not in a hurry to get rid of somebody, they are so effective as a stealth weapon to beam somebody, and this has been done many times, and it's recorded. You can beam people you don't as a government to give them cancer, breast cancers, neurological illnesses. You can choose what you want them to get.
You can choose?
Oh, you can choose. You can choose which pulse frequency you want to affect the brain with. You can choose the level of microwave irradiation and the speed that you want them to become ill. It really is a perfect stealth weapon, and all you need to do is rent a house opposite someone you want to get rid of, or a group of people you want to get rid of, and just beam them. The most famous case during the Cold War was the Moscow embassy siege, where in Moscow they beamed the entire American embassy and gave them cancer.
Did they cause cancers in all the staff or in a lot of the staff? Or?
Most of the staff, most of the children got leukemia, the women developed breast cancer, the gentlemen developed cancers. I think after about 18 months the entire staff was changed, and then the following 18 months the entire staff was changed again. And by that time people realised what was going on, and they found that they were being irradiated by microwaves. And rather than say, oh, isn't this disgusting, what have we sunk to, they thought, isn't this wonderful, let's develop this for ourselves. And governments today are still perfecting microwave warfare.
Still to this day they're working on the weaponry?
Still to this day, 2010, they are still perfecting the pulse frequencies. It's got very, very sophisticated. The pulse frequencies, the how long they can transmit, whether it can be one country to another, bouncing the microwaves off the ionosphere, so you don't even have to be in the same country.
Bouncing the microwaves off the ionosphere, a lot of people won't have heard of this technology. You're talking about the HARP.
If you have a super transmitter, the microwaves, if you beam them, it's only a simple basic trigonometry.
Yeah.
But let's say I want to bring economic ruin to a country that grows all of the world's wheat. Right? Okay? All I have to do is beam microwaves up to the ionosphere, which is like an invisible cloud around the planet, an iron cloud around the planet. The microwaves going up at a set angle will reflect off down onto this country. And if I continuously beam the wheat in this field, or the cattle, or the sheep, I can reduce the immune system of the plants so that they won't be healthy and they will die, and I can stunt their growth, and I can bring economic ruin to that country. I can harm all of the animals, the cows, the sheep. It's so easy to do. You only have to push a button, and you can bring economic ruin to a country.
Which countries have this technology already available? Is it all the countries in the world, or just a couple of them?
It may not be a wise thing to say on a live broadcast, but you can take my word for it that I know at least 2 super transmitters in the world that have this capability, and there are probably more in areas that I do not have access to and I cannot go to. But I know there are at least 2.
I need to just go back a little bit.
Of course, yeah.
Back to your early days in the military.
Mm-hmm.
This technology was used by the British government?
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
I can see where you're
it was used by the British government against terrorism?
We have 8,300 papers. I have knowledge of 2,300 myself. And what the governments found was that you could induce, by changing the pulse frequency, like Morse code, of the microwaves going into the brain and interfering with the brain. By specializing on the pulse frequency, you could induce psychiatric illnesses to the point where a psychiatrist could not tell if it is a genuine psychiatric illness or an induced psychiatric illness. So what you can do, theoretically, is you can target an individual's brain. They may have auditory hallucinations where they hear things, which is actually quite common with microwaves, or show signs of schizophrenia. For instance, 6.6 pulses a second can induce severe sexual aggression in men. So you could induce somebody to commit a really horrific sexual rape. So technically what you could do is have somebody committed to a psychiatric hospital or a jail for a crime just by somebody saying that they had a psychiatric problem whereby they didn't. Yeah. There is that. You can target other parts of people's bodies. You can target the heart and cause heart seizures. You can target the lungs and cause bleeding. You can target, if you're clever enough, some of the essential glands in the body that control all of the hormonal systems. So if you have dissidents or people that you don't like as a government, it's very, very easy these days to irradiate them and either have them wind up in jail or in a psychiatric hospital. And of course, there is no come on you.
Yeah. Now, these weapons that the governments have and are still using, are they more powerful than, for example, the Wi-Fi I might have in my front room, or my cordless phone, or a mobile phone transmitter?
No, in fact, they're actually, the power is slightly less.
Less?
The power is slightly less. The difference is, where you might use Wi-Fi, you might go in after work and do a couple of hours and then leave. And the Wi-Fi is going out in all directions. Here, they are targeting you probably with a beam, and it is on you all day. It can follow you everywhere you go, and it can target you when you're asleep as well. So you're really getting a concentrated dose. It's a bit like putting the light on in your house and sitting with a light, or have somebody follow you with a searchlight and beaming the searchlight on you all the time. So there is a difference between that. But in fact, the power can be less. It just takes longer. One specific paper from the government that lists all of the illnesses that you can get from microwave sickness, including severe neurological disorders. We have a government document that actually says this needs to be kept secret from the Western governments because it will affect the efficiency of the military, the weapons industry, and it will also affect industrial profit.
We have the government telling us that
this
technology is dangerous.
This is the United States Defense Intelligence Agency advising the Western governments to keep this secret so that they can protect industrial profit and military functions.
Kind of startling, really, isn't it?
It is so horrific that if it wasn't real, if somebody wrote a book on this, I would say this is so stupid, you could never make up a story like this. And it all goes back. It goes back to the 50s, the 60s and the 70s, when microwaves were found to be such a perfect weapon and so dangerous to the military that the United States Defense Intelligence Agency told the Western governments to keep this quiet. And they did. And this is why we have this. We have documents that show that governments pay people to experiment on people against their wishes. Well, not against their wishes, without even telling them. So, and we have all this information going back to 1976. Everything was known by 1976. Everything. We needed no more proof, no more research, nothing was needed. And we have the, drawn up in this country, the Nuremberg Treaty. And the Nuremberg Treaty was signed by all of the nations of the world. And it is a very specific treaty. And what it says is that no human being will be experimented upon without his or her consent. And before they give consent, they have the legal right to understand all of the implications, the health problems, the future health problems, and they have the legal capacity to say no. And where this is relevant here is that there is only one exception with the Nuremberg Treaty, and that is a doctor such as yourself may experiment on his or herself only. That is the only exception. It is Section 5. So no human being is allowed to be experimented upon.
Well, I think we know that that's not the case, don't we? Even though they write it in a treaty, do you believe that they wouldn't do it? Of course not. I think he understands that as well. That's why he's making this warning, giving us this information, which I believe is good, but I don't think it's the whole story. It never is. The point I'm trying to get at is, think about all of the things, for example, sitting in front of a computer, your cell phone, all those things are working on you. Add the constant beaming of these weapons that can be shot into the ionosphere. And I believe, think about chemtrails and all the metals that are up there. That could be one reason why they're doing it. It's making it easier to shoot those microwaves to wherever they choose. Now, I'm going to give you a personal story, and I just thought about it. I thought about it years ago, and the more I looked into microwave weaponry, the more I said maybe this is what happened. But when I was a young boy, about 10 years old, living in outside of Chicago, going to St. John Brebeuf grade school, this was in the 60s. I was maybe 10 years old. All of a sudden, there was a rash of leukemia. Number of children in my school, 6 or 7, I believe it was, and my mother, all came down with leukemia. It's an incredible story. She died, those children died, and I remember looking into the medical books on this. They couldn't figure out it. Was it environmental? Was it this? Was it that? But a rash of leukemia in one area during a specific time. My mother never being ill. She was 32 years old when this happened. Never ill a day in her life. Then a year and a half she was dead. And these children died as well. I wonder, back in the 60s, we didn't have these computers. We didn't have as much we didn't even have a microwave in the house, right? I wonder if that was a test area. I really do wonder now. And I wonder if they had targeted these people, or they targeted a number of people and it worked on certain people. Now, it's quite interesting that after this occurred, well, I'll get into the story of how the Vatican played a very interesting part afterwards when I was a kid. But I'll get back. And it has no reason why I have learned, I started to research the Vatican, although what happened was kind of indicative of who they really are. But anyway, think about that. And think about how helpless we really are with this type of technology. And what Trower Barry was saying, this was back in 2010. This technology, I believe, is so far advanced that, like he said, even if you wrote a book, you would consider it science fiction. So let's continue researching it. All of you people out there who have there's an organization that's constantly trying to get truth and understanding throughout the world. I get emails from them all the time. Give them your prayers. Hopefully we can understand this better. And just remember this. You don't know if you're being targeted. That's the insidious thing about this. And what I'm getting at, that's why I said this is the most important and most dangerous show you'll ever listen to, because they're taking these mind control elements to a whole new level. We'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Please have a good evening.